A curious phenomenon emerged in the early part of the 21st century. Groups of otherwise rational adults, upon the presentation of a camera, would simultaneously compress their lips outward and tilt their heads at a precise angle of approximately 15 degrees. The behaviour spread across continents within months. No one questioned it. No one asked why. They simply did it. Jung would have had questions. Many questions. I'm David. Welcome to the channel and let's begin. Before the smartphone, the self-portrait was a rare thing. It required intention, equipment, and a certain kind of deliberate vanity that most people were reluctant to admit to publicly. Painters did it. Photographers did it. The occasional narcissist with a Polaroid did it. But the average person moved through their life, leaving almost no visual record of how they wished to be seen. They existed in photographs taken by other people, at angles they did not choose, in moments they did not curate. And then, in the space of roughly a decade, everything changed. The front-facing camera arrived. The social media platform arrived alongside it, hungry for content and engineered to reward the most compelling version of whatever you were willing to share. And the selfie, the self-authored, self-selected, self-published visual record of how you want the world to see you, became the defining cultural artifact of the modern age. The average person will take approximately 25,000 selfies in their lifetime. They will post a fraction of them. The rest will be deleted, quietly, privately, in the seconds between taking and reviewing, in the gap between who appeared in the frame and who they had hoped to find there. Nobody has asked what happened in that gap. Jung would ask. He would, in fact, pull up a chair. Because what you have produced in those 25,000 images is not a photograph album. It is, in the most precise psychological sense, a document, a record of sustained and largely unconscious self-examination, evidence of the ongoing negotiation between who you are and who you are performing being, between the face you were born with and the face you are trying to construct. Jung spent his career examining documents of the unconscious, dreams, paintings, word associations, anything that revealed the interior life of the person producing it, often without their awareness. He believed the unconscious was always communicating, always leaving traces, always trying to tell the conscious mind something it had decided it could not afford to hear. He would look at your camera roll the way he looked at a dream, not as a record of what happened, as a record of what you wanted to happen, what you needed to believe about yourself, and, most revealingly, what you were willing to delete. Jung's concept of the persona is the starting point for any honest examination of the selfie. The persona is the mask, the social face we construct for public consumption. It is not entirely false. It contains real elements of who we are, but it is curated, selected, managed. It is the version of ourselves we have decided the world is allowed to see. Before the smartphone, the persona was managed in real time and in person. You wore it in the moment, and then it was gone. You could not review it. You could not optimize it. You could not take it again from a slightly better angle. The selfie changed all of that. The selfie is the first technology in human history that allows the persona to be constructed, reviewed, rejected, and reconstructed before anyone else sees it. You take the photograph. You examine it. You decide whether the mask is sitting correctly, and if it isn't, if the angle is wrong, if the light is unflattering, if the expression landed 3 degrees away from what you were aiming for, you take it again, and again, and again. Most people, if they are honest, will admit that the selfie they posted was not the first one they took. It was the one that most closely matched the image they carry internally, the image of who they are supposed to be, or who they are trying to become, or who they most need other people to believe they are. The selfie is your attempt to make the external match the internal, to produce, in pixels, the version of yourself you most need to believe is real. Which is why the ones you deleted are more interesting than the one you posted. The deleted selfie is one of the most psychologically significant objects of the modern age, and it is also, by design, the one that leaves no trace. Think about what a deleted selfie actually is. It is a version of you that you looked at directly and decided was unacceptable. Not inaccurate, unacceptable. The image may have been a perfectly faithful representation of how you looked in that moment. The camera did not lie. The light did not distort. You appeared in the frame more or less as you are, and you deleted it. Jung would ask, what was in that image that you could not tolerate? What did you see that produced the reflexive rejection, that immediate visceral sense that this version cannot be shown? Not to others necessarily, to yourself. Because the deletion often happens before the question of sharing even arises. You see it. You reject it. The finger moves before the conscious mind has fully formed its objection. That speed is the tell. The shadow, Jung's term for everything we have decided we cannot be, operates below the threshold of conscious thought. It doesn't deliberate. It doesn't reason. It responds. And the response to the deleted selfie, that immediate pre-verbal rejection of a particular version of your own face, is the shadow asserting itself. This is not me. This cannot be me. This version does not exist, except that it does. It existed long enough to be captured, and the camera, which has no psychological investment in the outcome, recorded it faithfully. The accumulation of deleted selfies across a lifetime is a visual archive of the shadow. Every version of yourself you looked at and refused. Every angle that revealed something the persona needed to conceal. Every unguarded expression that appeared in the frame before the mask was fully in place. Jung would not want you to post them. He would want you to look at them, not with judgment, with curiosity, because the face you cannot bear to show the world is carrying information about who you actually are that the face you choose to show is specifically designed to suppress. Now, the duck face. Jung would need a moment. For those who require a description, and I am aware that future listeners may encounter this episode at a point in history when the behaviour has, one can only hope, subsided. The duck face involves the deliberate compression of the lips outward, combined with a slight widening of the eyes and a tilt of the head to produce an expression that no human face makes naturally in any emotional state that has ever existed. Not joy, not grief, not surprise, not love, not even mild indigestion. It is an expression invented entirely for the camera. It emerged from nowhere, conquered every continent within months, and at its cultural peak appeared on hundreds of millions of faces simultaneously, regardless of age, background, nationality, or any other distinguishing characteristic. Evolutionary biologists have documented over 20 distinct facial expressions common to all human cultures. Joy, grief, disgust, fear, contempt, surprise. The duck face is not among them. It arrived fully formed from the cultural ether, asked no one's permission, and installed itself on the faces of the population with the efficiency of a particularly successful virus. Jung would find this extraordinary, not amusing. Extraordinary. There is a difference, and I wish to be precise about it. How does a completely artificial facial expression spread to hundreds of millions of people in months? Jung had a concept for this. He called it participation mystique, the psychological state in which individual identity dissolves into the collective, a loss of individual consciousness into group belonging, not through force or instruction, through the profound, ancient, entirely unconscious human need to signal, I am one of these people. We are the same. I belong here. The duck face is a participation mystique event. It is a tribal marking, a membership signal performed for a camera rather than a campfire. When a group of people arrange their faces identically, they are not expressing individuality. They are doing the precise opposite, temporarily dissolving their individual personas into a collective one. Jung wrote extensively about participation mystique in the context of nationalism, religious fervor, and the psychological conditions that allowed entire populations to abandon individual moral judgment in favor of collective behavior. He was not writing about the duck face. One imagines he would have preferred it that way, and yet the mechanism is identical. The scale is different. The consequences are, mercifully, limited to photographs. But the underlying psychology, the hunger to belong, the dissolution of individual identity into collective performance, the unexamined adoption of a behavior simply because everyone around you is doing it, is the same force Jung spent his career warning us about. He would not mock the duck face. He would trace it. And the source, as always, is considerably more interesting than the behavior. The tongue. I will address this briefly but thoroughly, in the manner of a scientist who has encountered a specimen they were not expecting and feel professionally obligated to document. At some point in the mid-2000s, a second phenomenon emerged alongside the duck face. Adults, and increasingly adolescents, began extending their tongues in photographs. Not in the way a child might stick out their tongue to signal playful defiance. In a deliberate, posed, carefully aestheticized way, as if the tongue itself had become a prop in the performance of a particular kind of studied irreverence. The message the tongue is attempting to communicate is something like, I am not taking this seriously. I know this is performative. I am in on the joke. I am cool enough to be ridiculous. It is worth noting that the people performing this studied irreverence are, without exception, taking it extremely seriously. The tongue is as carefully positioned as the duck face. The angle has been considered. The lighting has been checked. The irreverence is, in fact, the most labored part of the entire photograph. Jung would call this the persona attempting to preempt the shadow. One of the shadow's persistent criticisms of the persona is that it is trying too hard, that the carefully constructed public image is effortful, calculated, more concerned with being seen a certain way than with actually being that way. The shadow knows this, and it has a tendency to surface this knowledge at inconvenient moments, in the form of the private cringe that follows a post that was more calculated than you wanted anyone to know. The tongue in the photograph is a preemptive strike against that cringe. By performing irreverence, by signaling that you are not taking the photograph seriously, you neutralize the shadow's critique before it can land. You cannot be accused of trying too hard if you are visibly not trying. The pose that looks most effortless is, of course, the most precisely calculated of all. Jung would recognize this dynamic immediately. He would also, if pressed, note that it has not worked. The shadow is not fooled by the tongue. It has seen the 14 attempts that preceded the final photograph, and it has its own opinion about all of them. And then there are the filters. The filter is the technological completion of what the deleted selfie was attempting. Where the deleted selfie removed the versions of you that didn't match the internal image, the filter adjusts the image that remains until it does. Smoother skin, larger eyes, a jawline quietly rearranged, a version of your face that is recognizably you, but improved, refined, closer to the internal image than the mirror has ever managed to produce. Some filters have now progressed to the point where the face they produce bears only a passing resemblance to the face that applied them. The bone structure has been subtly relocated. The eyes are substantially larger. The skin is a different texture entirely. What is being presented is not an enhanced version of the actual face. It is a different face, one that happens to share the same hair. Jung would observe, with the patience of a man who had genuinely seen everything, that human beings have always edited the self before presenting it. Clothing, posture, the careful management of expression. This is not new. What is new is the precision, the quantifiability, and for a growing number of people, the compulsion. The person who cannot post an unfiltered image, who genuinely cannot tolerate their own unedited face in public record, has reached a point where the distance between the persona and the actual self is not being managed. It is being defended. The shadow material is not suppressed quietly. It is being actively erased. And erasure, in Jung's framework, always has a cost. He would know. He spent 40 years helping people recover what they had erased. There is a particular kind of person who takes a great many selfies and dislikes all of them, who documents their life extensively and feels, looking back at the documentation, an inexplicable dissatisfaction that has nothing to do with the quality of the photographs. The photographs are fine, the lighting is good, and yet something in them produces a feeling that is difficult to name. Not quite disappointment, not quite recognition. A sense that the person in the frame is real and also not quite the person they were hoping to find. This feeling is the shadow speaking. What it is saying is this: the person you are looking for is not in the photograph. No angle of light, no filter, no carefully arranged expression will produce the image you are actually searching for. Because what you are searching for is not an image at all. It is recognition. The deep, pre-verbal sense of being fully known, not as the persona, not as the carefully managed public self, but as the whole person. The version that includes the deleted photographs, the one with the unguarded expression, the one that appears in the candid shots taken by someone who loves you enough to show you as you actually are. The selfie cannot provide this. It was never designed to. When it is used casually and without compulsion, it is entirely harmless. A small vanity, a mild pleasure. The problem enters when it is being used to fill a need it cannot fill, when the number of likes stands in for the feeling of being truly seen, when the perfect photograph becomes the goal rather than the incidental record of a life actually being lived. Jung would recognize this not as vanity, as longing, as the entirely human hunger for genuine connection, redirected by the particular architecture of the modern world into a loop that promises the thing it cannot deliver. The duck face is fading. The data suggests this with some confidence. Future generations will look back at the compressed lips and tilted heads of the early 21st century with the same bewildered affection with which we regard the haircuts of the 1980s. Evidence of a moment in time, a collective participation in something nobody quite understood while they were inside it. One can only hope the tongue follows shortly. The selfie itself will not fade. It is too deeply woven into how modern human beings relate to their own image, their own identity, their own need to be seen. It will evolve. The technology will change. The specific performances will change. But the underlying dynamic will remain. Because the underlying dynamic is not technological. It is human. Jung spent his career insisting on one thing above everything else. Not that you become good or successful or at peace, simply that you become conscious, that you know yourself, the full version, the inconvenient version, the version that didn't make it past the first review, with honesty and without flinching. The camera roll is waiting. 25,000 images of the ongoing negotiation between your persona and your shadow, your constructed self and your actual self, the face you chose and the faces you deleted. You have been producing something for years. It is sitting in your pocket. When you are ready, really ready, it will tell you everything. Thanks for listening, and I hope you've gained something from our time together. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. This helps us to continue to keep making great content for you. Take care as always.